because Russia knows that if it mobilized against the technological and operational superiority of NATO, it would probably lose, and it would lose big time. So all that plays into this, I think, for the future. But it is a phenomenal achievement to knock down 6 Kinzhal missiles. The eighth contact group in January has come to fruition with the delivery of the Patriot missiles in April. It also tells you a bit about the theatre of war, because the launching of these from both the Black Sea and from Russian airspace and possibly Belarus airspace actually tells you where the theatre of war is, because the theatre of war is that land space and airspace which encompasses both Russia, Ukraine, the occupied Ukraine from a Russian perspective, Belarus, and the Black Sea. So that is their theatre of operations. But I think one of the most important things is actually looking at it the other way. So the Patriots have been effective. We know Storm Shadow has been used in Luhansk, which therefore holds strategic assets at risk of the Russians, which they thought were invulnerable. And I think that there's absolutely a problem with the Russian air defense systems. I think there's a software and radar problem, which leads to what we call IFF, identification friend or foe issues, and therefore fratricide or blue on blues. That's why they've been shooting down their own aircraft. And we can see this really in the last 3 years with a number of incidents. The first one was the Ukrainian airline, which was shot down 752 in Iran using Russian equipment. Now, that should have been able to discriminate between cruise missiles or they thought it was a US cruise missile, and they shot down a civilian airliner. They've not illuminated with their S-300s in Syria on behalf of the Syrians for the reason, or generally is thought, that it would show their technological and operational inferiority to Israel. And of course, Israel using F-16 and F-35s. And I think all this absolutely plays into the notion of why there is mutual deterrence, because Russia knows that if it mobilized against the technological and operational superiority of NATO, it would probably lose, and it would lose big time. So all that plays into this, I think, for the future. But it is a phenomenal achievement to knock down 6 Kinzhal missiles. But as I said last week, this is old technology with good marketing. It isn't really hypersonic missiles in terms of using scramjet powered technology or hypersonic boost glide vehicles, which is a real hypersonic thing. This is like scud hunting in 1991 with the PAC-3, the Patriot Advanced Capability 3, and it's significantly better radar than anything the Russians have.
Yeah, and I do want to come to, in a moment, the state of defences among the NATO allies. But when you look at Zelensky's tour of those European capitals, it has been a great success, hasn't it, Chip? He's got 2.7 billion euros worth of arms from Germany. Paris offering training, troop training and light tanks. The UK the other day, Prime Minister talking about training pilots and supplying long-range drones, which is all to the good. But of course, Putin is sitting there in the Kremlin counting on that support wearing thin over time.
Yeah, and I think all those visits were really a halfway point between the G7 later this month and the Council of Europe meeting. So I think the general message, I think, out of these is, rather like it's supportive of Biden. We're in it for the long haul and we support you. And I think that was particularly relevant with Germany because we'd already passed a number of months ago this Zeitenwende notion of the turning point. And, because they've had to look at their history of militarism in the 20th century. But I think there's another German word which is also really come into play in the last few weeks, which is, again, one of these terrible 6-syllable German words, Landesverteidigung. It's national defence. It is in their defence interest, as it is for France and the UK, and certainly the Bucharest Nine, those former Warsaw Pact or Soviet Union countries, to support Ukraine, because that is the persistent threat, and you can degrade that threat without any NATO boots on the ground whatsoever.
Yes.
That's a good investment of your money.
Yeah, and on the question of investment, a strategic question, it was pointed out the other day, America has committed maybe 5% of its defence budget to this conflict, but it's destroyed maybe half the Russian army, which looks like a pretty good strategic investment. I wonder, in these discussions, in the capitals of NATO and elsewhere, what will NATO generals, Chip, be telling their political bosses? Or is that purely a strategic question for the politicians?
No, it's not, because there is a strategy bridge between political intent and military power. So the generals should say, we'll answer the question, can we, should we, and must we, are the political questions. And that is, for example, what caveats, whether you should fire NATO supplied missiles into Russia or not. Now, I think there is that caveat there that NATO supplied missiles can't be fired, but we know that indigenous Ukrainian missiles have been produced, and they're the ones which can go to the deep battle in Russia, including those, for example, that have gone against targets recently in Taman, across the Kerch Strait, from the bridge over in Russian territory.